Welcome back to another chess game analysis video. Some of my viewers have suggested that I don't only show Grandmaster and classical games because they are normally quite perfect in opening and middle game, but also some rather short time control games like blitz games where a lot of mistakes happen in the middle game. So I decided to choose this game that I played yesterday against a user PKMD 1529 rated on chess.com. It was a 5+5 blitz game, so some mistakes happen, and I think you can learn a lot from mistakes, and therefore I'm going to show you that game. Also, quite an interesting variation, I think, because I decided to play e4 for once, and it happened e5, bishop c4, bishop c5, the Italian game. After like a transposition of move order, you could also begin with knight f3, knight c6, and now b4, the Evans Gambit of the Italian game. Very nice gambit, and it is objectively quite sound, more or less. The engine gives a very slight advantage for black if black plays perfectly. Bishop takes b4, so the gambit was accepted. We have c3 gaining a tempo on the bishop, bishop a5, the main move, d4, striking in the center. This is all pretty much standard theory. If you want me to make a theory session and a game analysis on the Evans Gambit, you can write that into the comments, and I'm going to take a look at that as well. I think the Evans Gambit is a very nice opening for white if you want to play aggressively and develop pieces and gain and win in the attack rather than the endgame. So another pawn is gambit that e takes c4. We have castles, and this gambit a third pawn. So black is up 3 pawns, but white has activity and development. And now the correct way to continue this, I somehow mixed up the move order. I remembered something incorrectly. It's queen b3, aligning against this pawn. The only reasonable way to hold on to the pawn is queen f6, and then we have bishop g5 kicking the queen, queen g6, knight takes pawn, and after bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop, and somehow this position is still very much unclear. The engine gives nil-nil, even though black is up 2 pawns, but it's just a development. So we are castled, we have 4 pieces into the game, participating in the game, and black only has 2. Maybe some ideas against the black king are possible. Black can defend this, but at some point maybe he has to give back some material. But this would be the proper way to play this. But I somehow mixed things up, and I play queen d5, going for a checkmate threat, attacking the bishop, pressuring the knight. Somehow I thought the queen was better here, but it's not actually. Queen e7, bishop a3, now attacking the queen, d6. And this is the first game move from my opponent that could have decided the game early on, because it's a huge mistake. The proper way is just to develop the knight with tempo. So black's queen is under attack, but white's queen is also under attack. So you basically trade queens, and if the queens are traded, black is up 3 pawns and the attack is basically gone. So maybe you shouldn't trade queens, but go back or onto the side of the board. This would have been a great move, knight f6. Develops a piece with tempo. I think it seems very natural, but it's also very natural to try to block with the pawn and defend the queen. And here I played e5, which is also a mistake. The way to exploit this mistake is actually bishop b5, overpowering this knight. And now the queen is actually very well placed, looking at the bishop. So prophylactically, you could save the bishop. That's the engine's preferred move. But then bishop takes knight, b takes, queen takes c6, and white is winning here because after the bishop blocks the check, or if you go on to f8, the rook is just gonna fall, and you're basically up a rook for 2 pawns, and this is definitely winning here. So bishop b5 would have been a very nice move to win the game, basically on the spot, but I played e5. I tried to open lines to the black king, which seems natural, but also this could also be exploited by the move bishop e6, and then the queen has to move, and you trade off, either you trade off one pair of bishop, or you take here on b7, and after the king moves, you have e takes d6, and black is still up material. It's not that clear of a position for me personally. I see some compensation for white, but probably that's not enough to hold the game. So E5 could have been punished by this very nice bishop maneuver, but my opponent captured with the knight, and now, interestingly enough, um, I took with the knight, which is also a mistake. I think this game very nicely illustrates that gambits lead to a lot of mistakes, especially if you don't know the theory very well. And in a blitz game, I just think it's very interesting that a lot of mistakes arise here in the position because it's such a complicated attacking position. Black just tries to hold on to material while White is trying to either gain back material or checkmate the black king, which is still in the center. So taking on e5 with the knight is a mistake. I should have instead taken on a5 the bishop, and after knight takes f3, g takes f3. Black has 4 pawns for a bishop, but white is better developed, so I would rather play with white in this position. Ideas like taking and the rooks into the center. Black's king is still in the center, not a good position to play. But I didn't. I took here on e5, which interestingly enough would have allowed queen takes e5, and then after queen takes f7, king d8, queen f8, check, queen a8, queen takes g7. This is more or less an equal position. Black still up 2 pawns, but very unclear position. This would have been the best way to defend for black. Queen takes e5. But now the move that was great before is now a blunder. My opponent played bishop e6, which attacks the queen, and he thought probably that he could take afterwards, but after queen takes a5, bishop takes c5, he missed that the knight now can take the bishop here. So knight takes c4. And interestingly enough, white has 2 pieces for 4 pawns, which is such a weird material constellation. I hardly ever had this, and white is definitely winning in this position. Knight f6, knight takes e3 development and capturing this pawn. Castles. Now finally black's king is out of the center. Rook fe1, kicking the queen with tempo, queen d7, knight b5. Now trying to trade off this knight, and after knight takes, queen takes. Remember, if you up material in chess, you should try to trade off material, which I did here. Queen a4, he tries to activate the queen. Bishop b2, now going on to this very nice long diagonal. c6, kicking the queen. Queen g5, now threatening checkmate. He defends this with f6. And now I played rook e7, threatening checkmate again, offering a queen sacrifice. The more sound approach here would have been just to align the queens here. And after the knight is being kicked, you have this very nice knight e3. And if you trade off queens, this is completely winning. So this would have been the better alternative, trying to queen trade and get into an endgame. But I just thought I had such a nice position here. If this is aligned, this is hanging, maybe the rooks can come in here. This is probably gonna be checkmate soon. So I just played rook e7, threatening checkmate with the idea that if the queen sacrifice is accepted, rook takes g7 check, king has to go into the corner, and now a very nice discovered check from the bishop, rook blocks, and now bishop takes f6 checkmate. So that's what I calculated when going in for rook e7, but he can just block this with rook f7. So I took the rook, he takes the queen. In this position, I was just like, okay, then first I rook trade, and then I move the queen, but I completely missed that after rook takes, he can also just take the queen. He doesn't even have to recapture the rook. That's what he did, and I was a little bit confused here. I gave this check, which is correct, king f8. Again, if you go into the corner, that's checkmate. So king f8. This is always the same motive throughout the game, like in 4 different positions, this very nice bishop on the long diagonal. King f8, and now the correct way is actually to take here. Rook takes h7, and after the knight is captured, you have this rook h8, check, king f7, rook takes rook. And for example, queen c5, rook e1, queen c2, bishop a1, queen takes a2, rook d8 and d5. I was very worried about the 4 connected pass pawns, but white is winning according to the engine. The engine says plus 73, so probably a checkmate in 10 or so. I was just worried in the game, and in the blitz game it's hard to calculate and evaluate this. Are you really gonna win with the 2 rooks and the bishop in this position against the queen with the 4 pass pawns? There is probably some kind of staircase checkmate here with the two rooks and the bishop, but I didn't want to go into this. I was a little bit worried, and I was also in time trouble. So I saw that the rook takes h7 would lead to winning the rook, but I was just not so comfortable with going into this. So I just decided to go for knight takes d6, which simplifies the position, but it leads to a draw. After rook d8, my opponent offered a draw, which I accepted, because after rook f7 check, king g8, rook g7 check. Remember, the bishop is here, protects the rook, so the rook can always give a check on g7, and the knight protects the rook if it wants to check on f7, and the knight also restricts the king from going to the e file. The only thing that I could have tried in this perpetual, if he really, after rook g7 check, went into the corner, then knight f7 would have been checkmate. But I just thought he's probably going to see this, he's just going to go back and forth, and after this repetition, the game would end in a draw. This was a little bit more of a chaotic game, a weird material constellation right out of the opening, a lot of mistakes, but that's happening when you're playing Blitz. That's exactly what's happening. So I hope you still learned something from it, and you enjoyed seeing how I always make mistakes. I don't want to always show perfect games. So in this game, both of us left a couple of very nice winning ideas, but in general, I think a draw is a fair result. If you want me to make an opening study on the Evans Gambit, a very interesting variation that you can play in the Italian game arising after the fourth move, b4, you can write that into the comments. If you want me to analyze one of your own games, you can also write that into the comments. I created a lead chess study where you can analyze these variations even further. I upload each and every chess game analysis episode over to lead chess, where you can analyze that more deeply if you want to, if you're interested in some variations, or if you want to, without my video, just go through the variations on your own and study them a little bit. Also, don't forget to check out my Twitch, where I stream live chess gameplays and other games. Check out my Instagram, and see you in the next episode. Bye.